Details on those stories and more in just a moment. But first, to check if your weather on the One's forecast.
Even at 9 o'clock at night, the streets of this community are generally crowded with people, especially during the holidays. So a stranger taking two small children into an alley like this one didn't go unnoticed. Investigators say that an adult came over here to see what was going on, and that was enough to scare away the suspect.
Well, Frederica, investigators are focusing their attention on a space heater and the power strip it was plugged into in the basement. While the exact cause isn't known, everyone knows for sure that 8 of the 9 people who died were children. The oldest was 7, the youngest were 2 babies just 6 months old. The blaze got started about 11 p.m. yesterday and raged for a couple of hours before firefighters were able to get it under control. It burned primarily in the basement and on the first floor.
The fire department fired Chapman 1 year later after denying her workers' compensation claim. All the time saying there was no evidence to support that she'd even been exposed to ticks while on the job. Well, that wasn't exactly true.
March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb. Or is it the other way around? More than halfway through the month, with all this snow on the trees and on the ground, it's tough to tell. With sirens wailing and Patriot missiles firing, the people who live here may have good reason to be afraid that Saddam Hussein will not only continue to strike back, but strike here, punishing the country that provided a sheath for a now drawn U.S. sword. In Kuwait City, Gary Anthony Ramsay.
The air assaults from the sea are still considered the jab and hook of this fight. And as the battle for Baghdad rages, there's still confidence among U.S.-led forces.
Today's actually not so bad. Visibility is about 10, maybe 20 feet. That's 3 or 4 car lengths if you're driving. You have to constantly wear something over your nose and mouth to keep from eating or even breathing it. And Lewis, police have charged a suspect with 2 of 4 attacks on children in this community that have taken place over the last 3 months. But cops say nevertheless they're glad to get this guy off the street because given his previous pattern of escalating violence, this may have only been the beginning. Police describe this man as a wolf who was living among the sheep. 40-year-old Keith Paladin is charged with attacking 2 girls, ages 11 and 12, last week in broad daylight.
She told him to don't touch me.
Chong Kim owns the deli where the most recent attack took place on Friday. The young girl said she was cornered, groped, and fondled in a back aisle. The attack was caught on tape, and those images led to tips that took investigators to Paladin's basement apartment on Grove Street.
It's very scary.
This is a community loaded with children. Parents are stunned to not only hear about the arrest of a suspected child molester in their midst, but also to know that kids on their streets were accosted.
I'm feel sorry for the girl and for her parents. We always watch the kids. We never put the kids outside, and always somebody stay with the kids. Always.
Paladin has spent much of his life inside prison. His arrest record goes back almost 20 years and includes stints for burglary and assault. But no sex crimes were in his file, meaning authorities did not have to notify the community when he moved there in May after his latest release from prison. But investigators point out there are 2 other violent crimes in his record. So if he's convicted of the charges he faces now, it could qualify the suspect to become the legal version of a 3-time loser, which would mean he'd spend the rest of his life behind bars. In Ridgewood, Queens, Gary Anthony Ramsay.
In the Iraqi desert of Ramsay, beware the breath of a dragon. This beast wasn't born alone. Iraqi soldiers blew up 10 oil wells to cover their positions as the war started, leaving these monsters in their wake.
It's a hot fire and you need to have lots of water.
At just over 5 feet tall, Sarah Akbar may not fit the appearance of a dragon slayer, but she is a member of the Kuwait fire team to put out the first of the oil well fires in Ramsay. Blazes so hot, the hairs on your body will singe 200 feet away.
The craziest thing can ever happen on the earth is to burn an oil well because this is energy.
Energy that bleeds from Iraq's economy and damages the environment as smoke smudges across the sky.
Each drop of oil that evaporates in a fiery volcano represents a resource that will never be recovered. Each damaged well coughs up about $500,000 every single day. And by Iraqi poverty standards, that's enough to feed more than 70 families for an entire year.
How important is fixing them and getting them repaired in a short period of time?
It is very important.
Kuwait oil analyst Kamel Al-Harami says that modernization is also needed with repair. Both are crucial to stability for his neighbors to the north.
They have to rebuild their country, roads, hospitals, schools, you just name it. For the last 20 years, they haven't done anything.
In the next 20 years, when this conflict becomes history and tales of what happened here are told, maybe they'll also speak of the dragons slain in the desert. In the Rumaila oil fields of southern Iraq, Gary Anthony Ramsay, New York 1.
Now, this is just into the New York 1 newsroom. The FBI and Port Authority are announcing an arrest of a former Kennedy Airport employee in a terror plot to blow up a jet fuel pipeline. The arrest was made last night. The former employee is from Guyana, and investigators, or at least sources, are telling New York 1 that he tried to recruit an FBI informant to help him with the plot. Investigators, or at least through the sources, are saying that this plot was in its very early stages. The suspect, who's, as we said, from Guyana, met with at least one radical group in Trinidad, and Trinidadian officials have made several arrests there. There is a press conference scheduled for 1 p.m. We'll, of course, bring you all the information from that presser as it happens. Once again, a terror plot targeting a jet fuel pipeline at Kennedy Airport has been foiled with the arrest of one former Kennedy Airport employee last night. Keep it right here on New York 1 for more information as this story develops. I'm Gary Anthony Ramsay with the latest in the New York 1 Minute.
You're watching New York 1 News all day.
Details on those stories and more in just a moment. But first, to check of your Weather on the One's forecast. More of the day's news coming up. And remember, if you see news happening around town or you have a story idea, call the New York 1 News tip line. That number is 212-NY1 News. Some serious charges are leveled against 11 guards at a federal detention center in Brooklyn. Prosecutors say they beat up inmates and then worked together to cover up the attacks. A captain and 3 lieutenants at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Sunset Park are accused of violating the civil rights of 2 inmates. Prosecutors say the captain, one of the facility's highest-ranking officers, led an attack on one of the inmates who was kicked and beaten, left in a pool of blood on the floor of his cell. The officers allegedly tried to make it look like a suicide attempt. One lawyer says this isn't the first time she's heard of prisoners being abused. All week we've been taking a special look at the governor's first 100 days in office. One of Eliot Spitzer's major accomplishments was passing a civil confinement law to deal with sex offenders deemed likely to repeat their crimes after being let out of prison. It took more than a decade to pass, but it was not without controversy. Our Molly Kroon has more. And that will do it for this half hour of New York 1 News. I'm Gary Anthony Ramsay. Straight ahead, the very latest on our top stories, and of course, a check of your Weather on the One's forecast.